Hey everyone, this is me, Logan Timelier Gieberly, and I wanted to talk about something. So, I wanted to talk about the type of people that use pride flags, that use pronouns, and the same people that use pronouns will try to tell you that they've always existed. These neo pronouns, I should say, the he slash him, she slash her, they slash them, just absolutely ridiculous labels, honestly. And, throwing up your pride flags like a gang sign just makes it look like a cult. It really does, and you're making natural homosexuals, natural lesbians, and natural trans people look absolutely terrible from what you're doing. And have you noticed that everybody that uses pronouns and pride flags all have the same ideology? They all think the same way. It's almost a complete conglomerate hive mind. Tell me when you see a libertarian, a centrist, a right winger, just any other ideology. Tell me when you see them using a pride flag. You might see one or two with a rainbow flag because, the rainbow flag is kind of inoffensive, right? But I still think that's like a gang sign. You know, you don't see anybody else going around. Like, let's say that there was like a straight flag or something, right? You don't, and on the right, you kind of do see people going around trying to claim they're a certain ideology. Like they'll call themselves a national socialist or something. That's another label. That's the same thing as the left using, their pride flags. It's just throwing up gang signs at the end of the day. It's ridiculous. It's childish. It's juvenile. You know? And then they'll try to tell you that pronouns and pride flags, always existed, right? They'll try to tell you that. Now, every time I tell them to go on the way back machine, right? Every single time I tell them to just go on the Internet Archive, just any kind of archive, really, find an old screenshot from the 2000s and show me where someone is using he slash him, he slash her, whatever. Show me that because it doesn't exist. These pronouns, and they're saying, oh, but the singular they always existed since, like the Nordic people. They used it. Nordic people weren't going around with dyed hair and telling you about their modern American political ideology. It's just like we're living in an absolute delusion right now. And by the way, when I'm speaking about pronouns, I absolutely do not mean what someone is, right? The people that use pronouns pretend to be something that they're not, though, right? You have two groups, right? Now, this isn't any kind of like tribalistic group. I'm specifically just talking about you have natural people and you have unnatural people. You have natural homosexuals, natural lesbians, natural trans people, natural anybody, right? Natural races, you have black, white, Asian, Hispanic, all in between, all after, all before. But then you have the unnatural type. You have people that support certain races over another race. You have Black Lives Matter. You have gay pride, right? You have transgender flags flying. You have one group of people on the left side here, not politically speaking. I'm just saying, you have one on the left, one on the right. You have just the corrupted version and the uncorrupted version, right? You know, and it's terrible. It's a terrible thing, right? These are the same people that go to your hobbies and they'll tell you that you don't belong in that hobby, even though you've been there from the beginning. We saw this with many video game communities and whatnot. You see it with even trading card games. You see it with Warhammer. I never played. I played some spin-off games of Warhammer. I haven't read the novels. I haven't, painted any figures or anything. I don't have anything against that, but and like I said, it's not just the left or right in America. It's this tourism stuff. These tourists exist on both political spectrums, right? In America, I should say. In America, you really have two sides here. It's absolutely ridiculous. Anywhere else in the world, everybody, each person has their own unique set of beliefs that's different from one another. But it's over here. It's kind of bad, you know. I don't align with any kind of side. Because either side, the right wing is just going to call me a degenerate. The left side is just going to call me a bigot. You know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they label you, what they call you. They just want you to be a cog in the machine like they are. And I'm not going to join them. I'm not going to be waving around your flag, on the right side or the left side. I'm not going to be waving around some kind of right-wing political flag, any kind of left-wing political flag. And they're going to try to tell you that what they're doing is not political. Going around into and trying to insert this stuff into the schooling system, you're going to tell me that trying to get me to call you something that, like, you want to walk up to me and try to tell me that I should call you king or queen. It's like, no, I'm not. No, the only king here is Jesus Christ. I'm not going to be going around calling you a king. I'm not going to, no. We're not going to be playing these little childish games of, call me this, call me that. Refer to me as this, refer to me as that. If you're my friend, right, and you clearly earn my respect, then I'm going to call you what you are. I'm going to call you a good person. I'm going to call you by whatever you are as a person, as a soul, as whatever. You're not going to force me to call you something that you're trying to be. And, like I said, I don't think these people, when they claim to be something, they claim to be a part of your hobby. They claim to be a certain sexuality, a certain race. Most of these people that try to claim these things are not those things, right? I have a pretty good example. When I first started using Steam around, I think it was 2011. You can check my account. I think it was 2011. It was like September 2011, I think it was, when I first got Steam. So when I first created a Steam account, one of the first people I met from Team Fortress 2 was, well, I'm not going to say their name, but they were a very cool person. I haven't spoken to them in a long time. But there was this one trans person, and I never referred to them as that, and they never referred to themselves as that. But just from talking, going back and forth, this person was trans, and they didn't have a flag. They acted, just like everybody else, and just like how I acted like everybody else. We were both two individual souls just talking to each other, just like every average day normal people. And this was 2011, by the way. Now, you did not have this kind of stuff, before 2011, before 2016. 2016 and, around 2013 is when these political movements started to happen. These new phrases started to come into existence, right? Like the neo-pronouns, for example. You didn't see pronouns in bio back in 2011. And you didn't see people throwing up pride flag gang signs all over the place either. You didn't see that. That's not something that you saw, right? But this person that I knew, we didn't refer to each other as anything. We're just like, hey, what's up, dude? What's going on, man? What's going on? And, this is language that everybody uses towards each other, right? When you say, hey, what's up, guys? Right? What's up, dude? This is something that everybody refers to each other as. It doesn't matter what race you are, what sex you are. It doesn't matter. Like, it's just something that is completely neutral, right? And what I was talking about before was, in terms of what people, I really don't like this word, identify. I don't like that word. It sounds like, it's, and I don't agree with the word dehumanizing either, because, animals are also capable of quote unquote human thought, human feelings, human emotion. I don't agree with using the word human in those contexts, but, I just wanted to say that, I'm not bashing anybody at all. I am not insulting anyone. I am not berating anybody. When I talk about pronouns, it's not the quote unquote identity behind those pronouns. It's not the identity behind the flags. What I'm talking about is the flag, the symbolism, and the pronouns themselves, not the person. I am not talking about the person at all, right? Because I obviously have nothing against what someone is, whether it be race or whether they're a man, woman, or if they're androgynous and they identify in between. I don't care. If you are that, that's something that you are. You can't change that, and you shouldn't want to change it. Whatever you're naturally born as, whoever you naturally are spiritually, you know. Being born as something that goes way beyond just your birth. It's what your soul is. You know. So I obviously have nothing against who or what someone is. However they display themselves and whoever they are inside and outside. I don't mind whoever someone is. I'm specifically talking about the pronouns the labels that people put on themselves. There's clearly a difference between those that use the labels and those that don't. It's terrible. And like I said, they'll enter your hobbies and they'll try to revolve your hobby around themselves and what they identify as. So they took my childhood game, RuneScape. Let's use RuneScape for instance, because that's, RuneScape 2 is one of my favorite games. Specifically around, I want to say the middle of 2006. That was my favorite time to play the game. I'm not saying the years after that were bad. 2008 was pretty cool, but I kind of dropped off after, around 2009. When 2009 happened, I didn't really mind the, the combat update, the evolution of combat. I didn't mind the free trade or removal or anything because, well, to be honest, I was kind of lonely in the game. I kind of, just stuck to myself and just mind my own business. So I didn't really care about the free trade stuff. But when that happened, I did get a little bit less invested because there was a lot less people playing the game, right? But back in the day, when you're playing RuneScape, what do you think of when you hear medieval MMORPG? What do you think of? Fantasy, by the way, I should mention fantasy. You think of, dragons. You think of, your armor tiers in the game, right? You see someone going around with a dragon chain body, dragon med helm, and you're like, that is a Legends cape. You see someone walking around with that. That is, it's prestigious. Like that's awesome. You think of the community. You think of all the communities online, all the RuneScape forums from back then. You think of all of this, mixture of things, all these experiences, the gameplay, this, the lore behind all the quests and everything. Really cool areas in the game like Melzar's Maze. When you're doing Dragon Slayer for the first time, and you have all of these amazing quests like Soul's Bane, for example. You know what I don't care about? I don't care about your sexuality. Why would you put pronouns into the game and gay pride stuff into the game? Why would I care who you're interested in? You can have a quest with gay characters, straight characters, any kind of characters. But why are you making an event shining a spotlight on me and my husband for what we're born as? Why are you shining a spotlight on the gender that we're attracted to? How weird is that to take our childhood game and put modern American politics into a British game, mind you? I'm not British myself. I'm American, which I don't associate with America. I don't even associate with this earth, this world in general. I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not materialistic whatsoever. I say that when I have stuff on my shelf back there, which I didn't finish setting up my shelf yet. I'm going to have to, finish setting that up. But it's, what do you even say about that? When you're playing a game from your childhood and you have these people that just kick down the door, enter, and squat down and just make a mess all over your game and tell you that you're the one that's not welcome. You do not belong in this game with your labels. if you know, if anyone else that's respectful is, homosexual, straight, you know, lesbian, transgender, whatever you are, and you're respectful and you respect the history and culture of the game, you are welcome there. It doesn't matter whether you're new, old, it doesn't matter, what your age is. It doesn't, nothing about you matters as long as you're respectful. And when people say tourists, they're not talking about new players whatsoever because we want to pass the torch. We want to pass the torch to people. I'm quite a newer player because I started playing in December of 2005. I say 2006 to make it more simple. I don't consider myself a 2005 player. I know I mentioned this before a whole bunch, but 2006 is when I really started to get into the game and whatnot. December of 2005, you can't call yourself an 05 player really. Yeah, well, you had a decent amount. You had a 1 month to immerse yourself in 2005, but there was updates happening so frequently that you can't categorize 1 year, right? Typically with an MMO, you can't categorize 1 year as one thing because of how much stuff is being changed, moved around, and added to the game. But I remember when Old School RuneScape came out, right? That was 2013, I think. I think it was 2013 was when OSRS released. They relaunched the 2007 version of the game. And then years later in 2017, all of a sudden, they put a giant rainbow with this character named Gilbert, where you have to find a leprechaun, you have to find, what was it? What was it about? You're trying to help him find his gay male lover by stitching together a whole bunch of rainbow colors. And they'll try to tell you that the game was always political with, the goblin quests and whatnot. And I have to say, I don't think that belongs in there either. I absolutely love the goblin quest line and everything. But yeah, no, those political undertones they're strange. And I don't think they belong there either. And those were from, when was that? I think it was it 2005 was when Death to the Dorgeshin came out, right? Was it 2005? I think it might have been. It might have been early 2006. I don't really remember. But there's also something that's pretty offensive about that quest with the allegories. Because, you have... I'm not saying that the ham members are offensive because obviously we know what they're based on, right? We know what the ham members are based on, but why are they comparing goblins to... That's weird, Andrew and Ian Gower, that... I have to say, man, that's really weird, right? I don't agree with that comparison. If you're trying to say there's good ones and bad ones, maybe you could have chose any other race in the game, right? Fictional race. Why are you comparing that group of people to goblins? I don't agree with that. I don't condone that. That's terrible. That should not be in the game. I don't want to say the game is made for children because it's not. But it just, it's strange, It's semi-made for children. There's certain adult topics in there, though, right? And I don't think that stuff belongs in a video game, honestly. I don't think those kind of allegories belong in a video game. I really don't. Unless that's what the video game is based on. We're talking about a medieval RPG where you're fighting dragons. The last thing I want to learn about is, just American politics. What were they thinking? It's a British game anyway. Why are they adding, I don't know. I'm trying to avoid talking about certain things here to avoid the censors, but it's odd, man. It's just strange. But you can't compare someone making an allegory to you know, that those kind of like politics that I think everybody can agree on, right? There's nothing being forced there really, right? Because it's a good thing. The message that they're trying to send is a good thing, right? You have good. That's what I'm talking about. You have good people and you have bad people. That's basically what the quest is about, right? Uh, Leaving aside, the non-allegory like lore stuff, right? Just overall, the allegory itself, it's a good message to send. I don't see how sending a message about your sexuality and who you're interested in, I don't see how that's a good thing. Because I'm not saying I'm different than anybody else, and being born as who you are and what you are, that has nothing to do with the game. And shining a spotlight on somebody for what they're born as is wrong. I don't want a spotlight shone on me for like, just imagine, right? Just imagine if they had any like other kind of event. Let's change the roles here. Instead of a gay pride event, what if they had like a white or black pride event in the game? You know, it's it's so disturbing. It's weird. Why would you have there should be no such thing as straight pride, gay pride, black pride, white pride. There should be no such thing as that. As those There should be no such thing as those things in a video game or anywhere. A group of people that claim to be quote unquote progressive, that claim to be quote unquote diverse, you know, I don't know. They don't seem very diverse to me because as soon as you mention this, as soon as you talk about this topic with them, I mentioned how I don't support DEI, diversity hiring, because that's hiring someone based on their skin color, And when you speak out against that, you get called a racist. Think about that. When you have a group of people or a person putting a list of races based on skin color on an oppression scale, and they're the one that's calling you a racist? Are you serious? They went cuckoo crazy. They're gone. They're calling you a racist when they're going around with lists, with lists telling you that you're an oppressor because of the shade of your skin. Like, that's why they project so much. That's why they call you a World War II German soldier when they're going around with a literal list of skin colors about what's acceptable and what's not. Is absolutely insane. They need to get a grip with reality. It's just, it is just so, I don't, there's nothing you can say about that, really. There's nothing you can say about that. It's so odd. It's so jarring. And by the way, this diversity stuff, this gay pride stuff, it does the opposite of what it's saying it's doing. It is causing so much harm, in between people's relationships. It's terrible. It's not diversity. Me and my friends, I mentioned this before, but we're all from different backgrounds, different races, just everything. And we all get along with each other. We all joke about each other. We all joke about physical attributes about each other. We all joke about who we are, what we were born as, because we're friends. We're all friends here, and they're trying to force diversity. And that causes conflicts in between people. That's what diversity is. It causes conflict. That's not true diversity when it's forced like that. And when you force stuff into a video game, right? For example, when I was talking about RuneScape and the Pride events they put in there, which thankfully Mod North removed those, and you have these tourists that are complaining that they're removed. They don't even play the game. These tourists don't even play the game. They didn't play back then. They didn't play recently. They're just, maybe they hopped in for 5 hours and they're claiming to be in your hobby at that point. So what do you think happens when a Pride event is added to a video game, or there's a Pride event in real life, and, you're just trying to live as anybody else is? You're just not going outwardly telling everybody what you are. You're not adding these pronouns to your bio. You're not flashing up a pride flag gang sign. You're just being you. You're just being who you are. And by the way, that's not a sexuality. That's not a race. Who you are is not it's not a race, it's not a religion, it's none of those things. That's not who you are. You're lacking a personality and a soul, and that's why you want to fill that in with something materialistic, a label. You want to use a label for that. But what do you think it's doing when a pride event is added to a game or anywhere else in real life? What do you think it's doing? That is segregation. Pride is segregation. Black Lives Matter is segregation. That is what that is. And there's no other explaining it. I don't care if you're one of those people online that writes weird stuff about me, that calls me a racist. If you're Spearow from WikiFur, or if you're Spinewielder from the official Old School RuneScape wiki, and you're on there calling me a bigot or racist, just take a look in the mirror about what you're actually supporting. How can you tell me that adding a pride event is not segregation when me and my husband we're just like anybody else, and you're trying to say that we're not, that we deserve special privileges for being born a certain way? You are the bigot. You are the racist. You are everything that you claim anybody else to be. You can't sit there and lie for this long. Everybody realizes that you're lying. When everybody looks at that WikiFur page that you made on me, when they go on the Old School RuneScape wiki and they see that I was banned for the reason, quote unquote, bigot by Spinewielder. And by the way, do not engage with any sort of conversation with these people. Do not engage with them in any way. You should just leave them to their own business, except, they're supposedly doxing people now. They're supposedly going around allegedly doxing people as well, which is, I would probably just report that. You can just report them for that. But, they're supporting segregation in these games by saying they agree with pride events and they agree with DEI, which is hiring based on skin color. That's what they are. When they call you something, there's a quote from the Marxist communist Karl Marx where he said, "Call your enemies what you are." End quote. That's it. And that's where they got it from. That's what they're taught. But that's what it is. At the end of the day, that's what all these political groups are. They're trying to cause segregation. Me and my husband, we're just walking around normally. We're just everyday normal people. We don't go around with these labels, these labels that try to fill in a missing personality, a missing soul. Your sexuality is not who you are. Absolutely not. Your race is not who you are. None of that is. And to say that, to go around and say, when someone asks like who you are and what you do, the first thing you say is I'm gay or I'm straight, it's weird. Is why don't you be somebody instead of trying to fill that in with a label like a pronoun? How about you actually just be somebody? I want everyone to take a look at this chart. This is from Google Trends, and I wouldn't be surprised if they change this in the future, but it's been this way for a few years now. You can go on Google Trends and just type in some of this stuff, and I want you to tell me if this is a natural progression here. Very strange. You can't look at me and tell me that this is a natural flow, a natural spike in a statistics chart. It didn't just start tracking stuff. It's been tracking stuff since 2004. And that goes for most terms, right? And you can notice a correlation with every kind of label you can possibly give yourself. So I just want everyone to take a look at this. And I think it's pretty interesting. I wanted to add something else here as well. I wanted to ask the question of, if these neo-pronouns always existed, why is it that you can't translate them? Some of them you can't translate. You can't translate non-binary or they/them to Spanish, for example. That's why certain newer modern video games, when they're translated to Spanish, there's no word that they're using for it. There was that Tamagotchi Life game that came out on the Switch 2 recently, And I played the one that was on the 3DS, and I really enjoyed that one, but there's something they added to the newer version that's only in the American version as well, the American translation. Now, technically it's in both versions, but it's labeled differently. So the Japanese version of Tomodachi Life on the Switch 2, the Japanese version only has an other option. It has male, female, and other. But the American version, the Western release of Tomodachi Life, has a non-binary option. Now, why is that? It kind of makes you wonder. It makes you think. Well, anyway, that's going to be it for the video. May Heavenly Father God bless you. May Lord and Savior Jesus Christ bless you and your eternal soul. And I will see you all around. Farewell for now. Bye-bye.